Consider February 2026. Cuba has 15 to 20 days of crude oil left. After that, the power grid begins to fail. Not because of invasion, not because of missiles, but because tankers stopped arriving. This is not 1962. There are no warheads on rooftops, only tariffs. Washington announces secondary sanctions targeting any country that continues selling oil to Havana. Insurers, shipping firms, intermediaries, all risk penalties. The mechanism is simple. If oil flows, punishment follows. Moscow condemns the move as economic aggression. Beijing calls it unilateral coercion. Mexico suspends commercial oil shipments while promising humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, in Havana, blackouts stretch past 20 hours at a time. Hospitals ration medication. Food prices exceed monthly salaries by multiples of 10. This is not a battlefield crisis. It is a logistical one. And logistics in the 21st century is power. The oil architecture. For decades, Cuba's energy stability depended on Venezuela. Before January 2026, Venezuela supplied approximately 46,000 barrels of crude per day at subsidized rates. Mexico supplied another 17,000. Cuba requires around 60,000 barrels daily to maintain baseline electricity production. The margin was thin, but it functioned. Then the structure fractured. Then January changed the equation. In early January 2026, Nicolás Maduro was removed from power in a US-backed operation. The geopolitical debate is irrelevant. The operational result was immediate. The Venezuela-Cuba relationship was not symbolic solidarity, it was economic architecture. Cuba provided intelligence services, security expertise, and regime protection. Venezuela provided oil. The arrangement dated back to 1999 and survived sanctions, protests, and political upheaval. When Maduro fell, Cuba's economic oxygen disappeared. Within weeks, Mexico halted commercial deliveries under pressure tied to broader trade negotiations. Cuba didn't just lose supply, it lost redundancy. The reserve clock. Cuba maintains strategic energy reserves. Estimates vary, but most assessments converge around 15 to 20 days at current reduced consumption. After that threshold, rationing becomes failure. Thermoelectric plants shut down. Water pumping systems stall. Refrigeration collapses. Public transport ceases. Hospital generators run until fuel is exhausted. Energy failure cascades into every sector. Modern collapse is rarely cinematic. It is procedural. Delays, rationing, shortages, silence, and markets, even in constrained economies, respond before politicians do. Why external rescue is limited? Russia has shipped emergency cargoes. One January delivery of roughly 100,000 tons of crude brought temporary relief, approximately 2 weeks at reduced burn rates. But annual shipments have declined steadily. Russia remains constrained by its own war economy and sanction regime. China invests in Cuban infrastructure and provides diplomatic backing at the United Nations, where 165 nations vote against the embargo. But confirmed large-scale oil deliveries remain limited. Why? Because geography matters. Cuba sits 90 miles from Florida. No major power wants direct confrontation in what Washington considers a strategic perimeter. Multipolarity does not erase spheres of influence, it complicates them. Rhetoric is inexpensive. Tanker fleets are not. What stress looks like on the ground. Energy deficits reached over 70% of peak demand during recent blackout cycles. The peso has depreciated dramatically in informal markets. Basic food items exceed monthly wages. Tourism, once a critical hard currency source, remains depressed. Sugar production, historically measured in millions of tons, has fallen to fractions of prior levels. Agricultural mechanization has regressed. Infrastructure decay accelerates. Dependency concealed structural fragility. When subsidy evaporates, structural limits surface. Cuba's model relied on external fuel and preferential trade. When the patron disappears, resilience becomes a theoretical concept. The strategic logic of pressure. Secondary sanctions are designed not merely to punish Cuba, but to deter third parties. The mechanism is indirect. Instead of blockading tankers, Washington raises the cost of participation for any actor considering supply. Insurance premiums climb. Shipping firms hesitate. Trade negotiations acquire leverage. The question is not whether oil physically exists. The question is who is willing to assume political and economic risk to deliver it. Economic pressure in 2026 rarely arrives as spectacle. It arrives as paperwork, compliance reviews, contract cancellations, escalating tariffs. The effect can be as decisive as blockade, without a single missile fired. 5 possible outcomes. Scenario 1, managed de-escalation. Quiet negotiations lead to limited sanction relief. Oil flows resume in controlled volumes. The regime survives with concessions. Economic strain persists but avoids total failure. Pressure becomes precedent. Scenario 2, prolonged scarcity. Limited shipments continue at insufficient levels. Blackouts stabilize into chronic condition. Cuba enters a new special period, defined by managed austerity. System intact. Living standards permanently reduced. Scenario 3, internal fracture. Oil reserves fully deplete. Elite cohesion weakens. Security apparatus faces resource constraints. Reformist or transitional elements emerge within the structure. Change occurs from within rather than through invasion. Scenario 4, escalation. Sanctions intensify. Naval enforcement expands. A maritime incident creates diplomatic crisis. External powers signal presence. Tension spikes. Low probability, high consequence. Scenario 5, strategic demonstration. A major power dramatically increases support to signal multipolar resolve. Large shipments arrive. Washington recalibrates to avoid confrontation. Symbolic victory for alternative order. Sustainability remains uncertain. The broader lesson: Cuba is not unique in its vulnerability. It is illustrative. Modern states embedded in patron-client relationships operate efficiently until the patron weakens or is removed. The 20th century associated regime change with invasion. The 21st increasingly experiments with economic choke points, energy corridors, insurance markets, trade architecture. These are not abstract instruments, they are structural levers. When pulled, they reveal how dependent systems truly are. The 15-day threshold. If reserves fall below operational minimums, the system faces a binary test. Can essential services be preserved long enough for external relief? Can elite unity withstand prolonged scarcity? Can symbolic shipments substitute for structural supply? The answer will not emerge through speeches. It will emerge through megawatts delivered, through ships tracked by satellite, through fuel gauges in silent power stations. 15 days of oil is not dramatic rhetoric. It is arithmetic, and arithmetic rarely negotiates. The countdown is procedural, not theatrical. When energy systems fail, political narratives adjust afterward. By the time consensus forms, the outcome is already embedded in infrastructure. Cuba's crisis is a test case. If economic siege proves effective without invasion, it becomes a template, and templates travel. The question is not only whether Cuba survives, the question is how many systems built on external subsidy remain one disrupted supply chain away from the same clock. 15 days. That is the margin between resilience and exposure. And the clock is not theoretical, it is logistical. It ticks in barrels, it ticks in megawatts. And once it reaches zero, the lights do not argue, they simply go out. Modern pressure doesn't always arrive with armies. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork, shipping contracts, and insurance clauses. If you're interested in understanding how these structural pressures reshape nations long before headlines catch up, this is what we examine here. Not noise, not outrage cycles. Infrastructure, patterns, power. If you want analysis that follows infrastructure, not headlines, subscribe. Because the next crisis won't begin with missiles. It will begin with a supply line.